I had no idea my journey would ultimately lead me to the White House. I was inspired to become a police officer after enduring years of domestic abuse and later having to give up everything I owned to go into hiding with my 4 young children. It was not an easy decision to go into law enforcement. I had to think about the danger and what would happen to my children if something happened to me. But I learned with the proper training and education, I would have the skills and tools necessary to keep me safe. Although the training kept me physically safe, it did not prepare me for the hostile environment that I would encounter. I loved being a police officer, and it did not take very long for my community to develop the same respect for me that I had for them. Unfortunately, it also did not take long for 3 of my male coworkers to make it clear that they did not like working with a woman as their equal. As a police officer, I worked with many fine and respectful law enforcement officers, but they would eventually turn a blind eye to the way I was being treated by these 3 officers. As a woman police officer, you realize going into the line of work that you are working in a field where obscenities and vulgarity are part of the job. We know that the line of work is not for someone who is sensitive to hearing and seeing the worst side of humanity. It has been my experience, and I'm far from alone in this, but most people actually become more respectful and calmer when a female police officer comes on scene. Most of the disrespect and hostility that I have been subjected to as a police officer came from my 3 fellow officers. Finally, after enduring years of harassment and discrimination within my department, things started to get very dangerous. I had no choice but to resign. It was not until after I resigned that I learned that I was not alone. After learning about the overwhelming number of women in policing that have shared my experience in their careers, I began educating myself about the widespread national problem we have with the blue revolving door for women in law enforcement. Then I decided to take some steps, 585,000 to be more precise, toward raising awareness about this issue. I decided I would walk to the White House. It took several months of planning and physically preparing for the walk. A AAA agent spun around in her chair when I told her that I needed a triptych mapped from the Poconos to the White House and that she needed to take into consideration that I would be walking. My mother, sons, and friends took turns driving a van that we had rigged up to follow behind me, carrying supplies and camping gear. The van also helped warn drivers that I was ahead. I also wore an orange safety vest so I could be seen easily. I not only used the triptych to follow my route, but as a journal. I talked with so many people along the way, and they all signed it. I had also wrote to the First Lady and the Governor several times to request a meeting with them. In addition, I emailed the First Lady and made several calls to the White House. As my departure date grew nearer, I would send more letters, emails, and leave messages, but had no response. Nevertheless, I left on July 3, 2009, with blind faith that I would get to speak with both of them about the status of women in law enforcement. According to a study conducted by the National Center for Women in Policing on the status and growth of women in law enforcement, the number of women in sworn law enforcement remains low, and in large agencies, the numbers have stalled and are even dropping. Women accounted for only 11.2% of all sworn law enforcement, down from 14.3% in 1999. In spite of overwhelming evidence that women are equally capable of police work, the widespread recruitment policies, selection practices, and bias in hiring keeps the number of women down. Moreover, once on the job, women often face intimidation, harassment, discrimination, and are maliciously thwarted, which undermines any effort to recruit and retain women in law enforcement. Much research has been conducted not only in the United States but internationally on the style women police utilize. They rely less on physical force and more on communication. They are often better at diffusing potentially violent confrontations and are less likely to become involved in excessive force, citizen complaints, and civil liability payouts. The underrepresentation of women in policing is a substantial contributing factor to the widespread corruption and excessive force scandals. The implications of women in the community who are victimized by domestic violence are significant, with the underrepresentation of women police. According to the Journal of Criminal Justice, women officers respond more effectively to domestic violence incidents, which constitute half of all violent crime calls to the police. Even more disturbing, according to the police studies, which found that up to 40% of police officers commit domestic abuse themselves, which means that 4 out of every 10 officers responding to domestic violence calls are abusers themselves. I made a brief stop at the governor's office in Harrisburg before continuing my journey. It took me a total of 18 days and 225 miles. As I got into Washington, there were shouts from motorists and pedestrians encouraging me that I was almost there. Finally seeing the White House, which I had never visited before, felt almost surreal. There were so many tourists coming up to me asking questions about the walk and taking my picture. One gentleman had actually seen me walking about two weeks back and was very excited to witness my arrival. 2 Washington, D.C. Bike Patrol officers also stopped and talked with me. After they left, the female Bike Patrol officer returned with a uniformed Secret Service officer. The Secret Service officer asked me some questions and then abruptly told me that I would have to leave. He said if I did not leave, he would have to put me on report, and if I was on report with the Secret Service, I would be considered one of the crazies who protest outside of the White House. I assured him that I was not protesting, but he insisted that I was and told me I had to move along. I was so bewildered and confused as to why this officer had singled me out when there were hundreds of protesters and activists demonstrating in front of the White House. Some were even shouting and chanting. Yet he did not make any of them leave, only me. Then I realized, as I was walking away in compliance to his order, he did not like the message I was sharing. The officer did not see me as a threat to the president. He saw me as a threat to his own masculinity. How ironic to walk all that distance to raise awareness about how women in law enforcement are mistreated in the workplace, to end up being silenced and run off by yet another law enforcement officer. What irony to have my rights violated again by a law enforcement officer, this time right at the front door of the White House. Well, women make up over half of this country's workforce now, yet we continue to earn over 20% less than men. However, women employed in non-traditional or male-dominated jobs are generally paid higher wages than traditionally female occupations. But there are many barriers for women when they are working in male-dominated fields. Anyone committed to equal rights and social justice really should concern themselves with the importance of preserving and enforcing equal opportunity as a way of helping to ensure that all individuals in our society have an equal opportunity to succeed. The first woman police officer in this country was appointed in 1910. That was 100 years ago. Yet the number of women in law enforcement is only teetering at 12%. The negative attitudes of male colleagues is one of the most significant problems experienced by female officers. But attitudes can be changed with proper education and training. Yet law enforcement training programs across this nation are not addressing this. One of the things I would talk to people about when I was walking to the White House was the fact that although it may look like there are more and more women going into law enforcement today, the sad fact is that it is a revolving door, because just as many women are leaving, and it is not because they cannot do the job, it's because they can. I told my daughter that I wanted my 2 granddaughters, Gwenny and Shyla, to have my AAA triptych from my walk as a memento of my fight for equal rights, a battle I really never want them to know. It's my hope that children everywhere will only know the battles for equality by reading about them in our history books and not by living them in their daily lives. After all, when we tell our daughters that they can be anything they want to be when they grow up, shouldn't we be telling them the truth?
My dear sister, I can't understand the troubled times in which we live. like a